Welcome back to PsyberSpace. I'm your host, Leslie Poston. This is the show where we help you understand your world by exploring how psychology, culture, media, and technology shape the way we all think and live. Today we're talking about trust. Not the fluffy kind of trust that shows up in motivational posters. I mean the trust you use to navigate your life. The trust you rely on when you're making a health decision or choosing who to believe when you're taking advice. And the trust that allows you to feel grounded in a world that keeps changing around you. A lot of people have been feeling something shifting under their feet lately. You can sense it in conversations, online and offline. It shows up in fights about universities, healthcare, elections, public safety, climate science, even debates about simple, formerly well-established facts. It's that feeling that the shared reality you thought you lived in with other people is starting to stretch and warp. It's where you ask a question and you're getting 10 conflicting answers, each presented with total confidence. And underneath all of it is this quiet but steady sense that clarity is slipping away from the average person. That feeling is not random and it's not personal. It's also not coming from a lack of effort or intelligence on your part. You're living in a moment in time where your ability to trust knowledge itself is being reshaped by powerful forces. Some of these forces are open about what they want to achieve. They wrote a whole 900-page book about it last year. Other forces are hiding it behind political stunts, funding pressures, or manufactured outrage. And all of them benefit when you feel confused because confusion doesn't make you question them. It makes you question yourself. There's a term for what's happening in the information space, engineered doubt. It describes the deliberate creation of uncertainty. It's used when people in power decide that real research, real expertise, and real evidence get in the way of their goals. And the best way to weaken research is to weaken your confidence in it. Once your confidence slips, everything else becomes negotiable. Political pressure on research is certainly not new, but the intensity and boldness of it have grown. Legislators hold hearings where experts are interrupted, mocked, or framed as enemies of the state. University programs are targeted because they study topics that make powerful people uncomfortable. Public health agencies are pressured to shape their messaging around political goals rather than scientific ones. Sometimes the pressure is overt and hostile, and sometimes it's quiet, but it's always relentless. A recent systematic review pulled together studies of researchers working under political pressure in many parts of the world. What emerged from that review is a pattern of human suffering that we rarely talk about. Researchers themselves reported fear for their safety, their jobs, and their futures. They talked about sleepless nights and described the stress of wondering whether a particular word in a proposal might get them investigated. Some described depressive symptoms and some described trauma. And the authors of that review were careful. They didn't exaggerate. They simply described what the evidence showed. Political pressure doesn't just distort research itself, it also harms the people who do the work. In the United States, pressure often shows up through threats to funding. Entire fields can rise or fall depending on what a few committee members decide is politically acceptable. A study on climate resilience can be redirected or dismissed entirely if it challenges the interests of donors or industry groups. A study on public health can be reframed as activism instead of science. This kind of pressure doesn't look dramatic from the outside usually, but inside the system it shapes everything. Researchers learn very quickly where the invisible lines are and learn that stepping over those lines can cost them their entire careers. It even dissuades students from pursuing entire lines of inquiry in their research before their careers are even started. You probably never hear about the most powerful consequence of political pressure. It isn't the hearings or the public clashes or the dramatic TV moments. It's the increasing silence that grows inside the system. Researchers start pre-editing their questions before anyone sees them. They remove words like equity, gender, woman, climate, or racism from their proposals entirely because they know those words trigger political backlash. They begin to avoid certain populations or topics that might be labeled controversial, leaving them unstudied. They shift their efforts to safer subjects, not because those subjects matter more, or in some cases at all, but because the risk is lower. And this kind of self-censorship is invisible to the public. When you read a headline about a new study, you're only seeing the research that was allowed to survive, and you're not seeing all of the projects that never existed because someone feared retaliation. You're not seeing all of the questions that never get asked, or the creativity that was trimmed away before it reached daylight. The absence created by this silence is powerful. It limits the knowledge the public has access to and narrows what we even imagine is possible to study. It creates a shadow world of unrealized research that could have helped us live healthier, safer, more informed lives. And that absence becomes the perfect opening for engineered doubt. Because when the public only sees a partial picture, it becomes easier for political actors to claim that the entire system is biased or corrupt. When researchers fall silent or soften their findings, the public receives a thinner, more cautious version of their knowledge, and political actors seize on that thinness to push a narrative that research can't be trusted. The irony is that the same forces that create the silence are the ones who point to it and say, see, science doesn't know anything. And that's engineered doubt. It doesn't try to replace scientific knowledge with a better alternative. It just wants to weaken your confidence in the idea that knowledge is possible or valuable. It aims to exhaust you because exhausted people are less likely to push back. This disorientation is psychological. When you are constantly told that institutions are lying, that researchers are corrupt or studies are fraudulent, or that experts are part of a conspiracy, it creates a cognitive strain. This makes it harder for your brain to process information, harder to make decisions, and harder to trust your own instincts. Some people respond by shutting down and just deciding that everyone is lying. You hear them on the internet saying things like, oh, we're cooked now, fam. Others respond by trying to verify everything themselves. They read every headline, chase every source, and try to become their own expert in every field. These are the people that I hope listen to this podcast so that I can take some of the burden of research off their shoulders. Both responses are emotionally draining. Both responses reflect attempts to cope with the loss of stable truth and can leave people vulnerable to misinformation. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence is weaving its way through this landscape. It's not the center of the problem, but it accelerates the confusion. Large language model AI generated studies, generative AI generated fake experts, deepfakes, AI created summaries that distort real findings all add to this fog. You don't need a dedicated AI segment for this show because it's simply another instrument used to amplify engineered doubt in this case. Not the cause necessarily, but certainly the accelerant. Living in a climate of engineered doubt has real health consequences as well. Our stress rises when the world feels unpredictable. We lose sleep, we experience irritability, distractibility, and a sense of helplessness. Decision fatigue becomes constant. Something as simple as choosing whether to get a vaccine or pick a new doctor or whether to trust a news story has become a heavy cognitive task. Our nervous systems can only stay in high alert for so long before they begin to ache. Psychologists are seeing more people describe a sense of drift, that sense that nothing feels reliable for long or that the floor keeps tilting. This reporting isn't melodrama. People who self-report this sense of drift aren't being melodramatic. It's a normal response to having your certainty attacked instead of strengthened on a daily basis. People also begin to pull away from communities that once helped them make sense of things. When trust breaks, people become less willing to share their worries with others, fearing judgment or fearing misinformation. They fear hurting someone by giving them information that might be wrong, and so they stay silent. And this silence deepens their isolation, And isolation is one of the strongest predictors of mental distress. Researchers feel just as disoriented as the public, but with an added layer. Their work is the target. Their identities are tied to the pursuit of knowledge. When that pursuit becomes risky, they feel the loss in a personal way. Some researchers have described the anxiety of waiting for a hostile email or a threatening message, while others describe being misquoted online or having their findings twisted. Some experience organized harassment campaigns from political groups or other groups. Many fear that their work will be taken out of context and used to harm the very communities that they study. Some fear for their physical safety, some fear for their families, and many fear of losing their jobs. Several have chosen to leave the United States in recent years. Migration in the face of engineered doubt is not uncommon. Burnout in academia is rising. Talented people are leaving. Fields that require years of expertise are losing the people who carry that institutional memory. When a senior researcher walks away, we're losing more than a person. We're losing their lineage of knowledge, losing mentors who could have trained the next generation. We lose stability inside a system that is already destabilized. And this erosion also affects the public. When fewer experts remain, misinformation fills the vacuum. When fields shrink, bad actors have more room to claim authority, and engineered doubt thrives in that vacuum. Engineered doubt doesn't just affect individuals, it's reshaping the collective mind. It's changing how people vote, how they understand risk, how they view institutions, or how they process conflict. When trust breaks, people often look for someone who promises clarity. Not accuracy, clarity. That's important. The kind of clarity that comes from a single story, told loudly, with no room for questions. That kind of story feels comforting in a world filled with uncertainty. It can feel like safety or relief, and that leads to authoritarianism. And that is why engineered doubt is such a powerful political tool. Once trust is weakened, people become receptive to simple explanations, leaders who claim only they can fix things. They become more receptive to communities built around shared anger or shared skepticism. These communities offer belonging in name only, because belonging built on distrust creates its own kind of instability. It closes people off from new information and narrows the emotional bandwidth for change. Engineered doubt is not about winning an argument. It's about shaping the environment so thoroughly that people no longer know where to turn for truth. And when people feel lost, they're much easier to steer. Even inside this fog, though, there are anchors. Trust doesn't require perfection. Research isn't flawless and institutions make mistakes. But the process of science includes correction and transparency. It's designed to evolve. You don't need to believe every study to have trust. You just need to notice which sources show up with honesty and consistency. You're allowed to rest from the constant work of verification, and you don't have to solve the entire trust crisis alone. You don't have to have perfect answers. You just have to stay aware of the tactic. Engineered doubt loses power when you recognize it as a tactic and not as a reflection of reality. Once you see how it works, it becomes easier to spot it and step out of its grip. Feeling confused is not a sign that you're failing, it's a sign that you're paying attention in this chaotic environment. And paying attention is itself a form of resistance. Awareness interrupts manipulation, and it strengthens your ability to rebuild trust in ways that are more durable and honest. And if you're a researcher experiencing genuine PTSD from this environment, call a therapist that understands what you're going through. Thank you for listening to PsyberSpace. I'm your host, Leslie Poston, signing off. As you know, new episodes come out every Monday, so if today's episode helped you make some sense of the tension you've been feeling, share it with someone else who might be struggling too. None of us are meant to navigate this alone, and none of us deserve a world where clarity feels out of reach. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a week, and stay curious. See you next time.